today's panel play a role in ensuring that the UL systems, institutions uphold their responsibilities to address and prevent sexual harassment, sexual assault, and gender-based discrimination. During this session, we will delve into the structure, roles, and importance of Title IX and power-based violence initiatives in establishing and sustaining safe and equitable educational environments across our institutions. It is my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. Senator Regina Barrow, Louisiana State Senator, District 15. Dr. Kedrick Nicholas, Dean of Student Affairs and Title IX Administrator, McNeese State University. Monica Taylor, Education Director, Louisiana Attorney General's Office. Nicolette Joseph, Children's Advocacy Coordinator, Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Lacey Johnson, SGA President, Southeastern Louisiana University. Welcome, panelists. First, I'd like to start with Senator Barrow. Welcome, Senator Barrow. Considering the allegation, which we're all very grateful for, the allocation of funds across institutions following Act 472 of the 2021 legislative session, and your active involvement in this process, could you please elaborate on the significance of securing funding for both Title IX initiatives and power-based violence?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Certainly, I sure will. But before I do that, let me just first get, these things that I think are so important. My thank yous in order, and I will make sure I do that before we really get started. So I would like to thank you all for inviting me to be here. I'm very happy to be here, be a part of this distinguished panel. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Henderson, who I saw a lot of during the beginning of this process. I want to thank you for your hard work, along with many of the other system presidents. Dr. Calais, and when she started, she was not a doctor then, but now she is, and I'm so proud of her. I remember when she came and she told us she was in the process of getting her doctorate degree. We are very happy for you, thank you so very much. And then, of course, Dr. White, thank you so much for having me here at your university today, and I hope I haven't missed anyone. This is important because prior to, and many of you may know the story that kind of landed us here, was the allegations against the LSU system. And we began to delve into what was happening with Title IX and some of the structural failures that we had. And in doing so, we found out that there was not enough money allocated to really address and really establish the departments the way they needed to be established. And so with the money that we were able to secure, $5 million each year, it's allowed each system to be able to really create a better structure, because it's my understanding that I think you guys can still use a little bit more money. But to be able to create a better structure, to be able to do some of those technical things, have a better technical system in place in terms of one that can communicate and give you real-time information, as well as basic things. Like one of the big issues that we found at, I would say, LSU was lighting. And so it was able to address all of those type of issues that kind of loomed out there that was contributing to this problem.
Thank you for that, Dr. Barrow, and I think I speak for all the practitioners. We're grateful for the funding. Policy and regulation change is so important, especially when we're talking about funding those types of resources and tools for our university communities. How might future administrations, our legislative actions, how might they impact Title IX and power-based violence? And Dr. Nicholas, if you could join in with Senator Barrow on that one.
Well, certainly that's a very important question, and certainly with every administration, whether that's federal, state, there are changes in terms of what their commitments or obligations are, or what their priorities are. And so making sure that this remains a priority across the board, I think is going to be one of the things that we have to ensure. With a new legislature coming in, we have to ensure and make sure that they understand the importance of ensuring that we continue to, at minimum, give the $5 million each year. But we really need to do a little bit more. So if we have members coming in and that is not a priority, then as we begin to, God forbid, but this is a factual thing that we have to consider. We know by 2026, the fourth or fifth of a penny could be rolling away. If that happens, then there's going to be cuts. And where do these cuts happen? We know that they happen in healthcare and education. And for some people, they may see this as not being a priority or something that we can afford to cut. Well, in my opinion, we cannot afford to cut it. But it's one of the things that we certainly have to make sure that we're taking a look at and ensuring that my colleagues understand the importance of where we've come, where we are, and where we're needed to continue to go.
Thank you, Dr. Barrow.
And I'll add to that more from the operational side of things. If you've been in the world of Title IX work for the last 5 or 6 years, you've seen the volatility in terms of what we were not required to do versus what we're required to do today, and all the changes that have taken place over the last 5 or 6 years. So the influence that federal and state politics have on that is tremendous. For instance, we're all right now looking at a change in our regulations that's going to widen and broaden what our responsibilities are in terms of Title IX and when things are Title IX cases that typically weren't in terms of jurisdiction. So I think that's where that influence comes in. I think it's always going to be driven by what the current trends are. So as you mentioned, Senator Barrow, if it were not for the LSU situation, would we have the funding that we have today? So it's unfortunate circumstances that typically leads to the changes and the special interest that's influencing those that have the ability to change legislation and regulations that apply to Title IX and power-based violence. So I think it's tremendous in terms of the impact, and again, in our world, we've seen it. We literally have to make sure we stay in tune to our professional associations and colleagues to be sure that what we're doing right now is applicable to right now. We have all these different things where if somebody makes a report and that report is from a circumstance that occurred before the regulation changed, and now we have to operate according to the previous regulation and not the regulation that's in place right now. So those things are all things that make this work challenging, but it is important that we have legislators who are committed to making sure that this work is done properly on each of our campuses.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas. And we can't talk about influence without talking to the students. And so, Ms. Lacey, I want to ask you, sitting in the perspective of a student leader here on the campus of Southeastern Louisiana, how does your institution promote awareness and education about Title IX rights and power-based violence? How do y'all do that for the students?
Okay, perfect. Well, hello everyone. So I am very blessed to be at Southeastern. We have faculty that's always very available to us, and that's so important because educating students like on Title IX and before even happens, before an incident happens, is so important. But I'm blessed to be in a place where our faculty is available to us. We have lots of conversations about it. In my student government, we are having many conversations about this, small talk conversations, because that's where it all starts. It all starts with a conversation, and it's just about education, conversations, and having that availability, and it empowers students too, because you want to talk about it. So that's my perspective as a student.
Thank you, Ms. Lacey. And I love that you say empower students. How can institutions do that? How can we better empower our students to have a voice and dialogue through those conversations?
I think really just being there, remembering that we're human, remembering the reason for why we're doing all this. We're not doing all this for a trophy. We're doing this to protect students. We're doing this to show students that we care. We need students to know that they're not a number or statistic, but they're a person with a story, and their story needs to be protected and defended their entire years that they are in school, and beyond that too, so they can protect future students too.
That's good. Thank you. And so I want to talk to Ms. Taylor about the work that you do across the state in assisting us to prepare our university communities and talk about what Ms. Lacey just said, the safety of it all and those conversations. We know that the work that you've done with law enforcement has been important in terms of maintaining compliance with Title IX as well as power-based violence. So can you talk a little bit more about that work and some of the things you've done throughout the course of the year following the legislation?
So one of the things when Senator Barrow and her colleagues passed the legislation is they included a memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement, and they also included the Attorney General's office in sort of facilitating that, serving as a legal piece, but also an education piece for this. And really, I think it's grown and changed a little bit maybe than what Senator Barrow intended it to be. And I do credit the Attorney General, the governor-elect, for allowing me the ability to be able to do that and give me that space. And what has really happened is, you talk about empowering students, is that what I found out is that local law enforcement as well as campus law enforcement really want to help students, protect students, serve students, and they want to serve them through protection. And so there really is a need and there is a want there. I have been incredibly lucky to work with the whole UL system, going to many of the campuses, not only training local law enforcement so that they understand what their duties are that the legislature has assigned to them, but also what their duties are that they have as a right for these young men and women who live in their communities, and how Title IX, one of the biggest things that we hear is, I think the weirdest thing about Title IX to me is that in the criminal justice system, you have the criminal justice system and the civil justice system, and they operate independently of each other, and the criminal justice system always takes precedent over the civil system. That's the way it is out in the world. That is not the way it is in the Title IX world. So Title IX, which is basically a civil solution to these issues, happen in tangent with the criminal justice system. And so I'm really focused on making sure that everybody is communicating and working together, and that not only the Title IX folks, but also the law enforcement folks are really listening to what the students need and want, and expressing to them that they have a chance in some of these cases to change the course of students and even possibly change the course of potential perpetrators.
That's good. Thank you, Carmen, for that. Especially that piece on listening. There's so many people that are involved with the work that we do. And I want to explore that with Ms. Joseph a little bit. In terms of those strategies, how can we as institutions employ to promote gender equity beyond addressing interpersonal violence? I know that you are boots on the ground in terms of educating the state on what it looks like with dating violence, partner violence. So what can we do beyond that?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. This is a great topic as well as an awesome panel. And we know that gender equity in our institutions, it doesn't automatically come easy or a fly-by-night kind of thing, that it takes conscious actions. And there are some victories and some milestones when it comes to our institution's progress on gender equity. But there is always room for improvement, as we all know, that ensures that equality as well as inclusion of all students and faculty as well too. And gender equity is the provision of fairness and justice in the distribution of benefits and responsibilities between men and women and all genders, as we know. And two guiding principles that are at the core foundation of gender equity are fairness and impartiality. And as we know, that fairness has to do with the just treatment without favoritism or prejudice, while impartiality, it usually focuses on treating all individuals equally. And in gender equity, it means respecting all people and persons and individuals without discrimination, regardless to their gender, culture, or background. Also, addressing those gender inequalities that limit a person's ability to access these opportunities to achieve better health, education, or even economic opportunities based on that individual's gender as well. And just a few strategies that you can help promote gender equity across your institutions is, different ways that we can do that is, first we can do maybe some faculty professional development. Have an expert that can come in and train the staff, whether it be for staffing services regarding, gender equity, diversity, implicit biases, and also some form of inclusion as well too. And also too, we can develop individual department level diversity, equity, and inclusion goals that apply to each department and each agency as they see moving forward. Also, very important to use a gender inclusive language. The use of gender inclusive language is an important way that everyone feels included and respected at our institutions and throughout our universities. And also as well too, we can respect these preferred pronouns. And when a student or an individual, they express that they prefer to be used and spoken to in a specific pronoun, that we can honor this and speak to them in a way that they feel respected, seen, and empowered as well too. And also as well to make sure that we're reviewing our institutions, guidelines, and policies that fall under gender equity. And this will ensure that students and faculty and staff and our individuals, that they are respected and empowered like we spoke about earlier and seen. And this information should be on the website, in your catalogs, as well as in your handbooks as well too. And another thing I want to say lastly, also check your biases that you may have. A lot of times that we have biases that we aren't sure of and that we aren't aware of until we may come in contact with someone from a different culture background, a different gender identity, or something of that nature as well too. So that, professional development, that training, those handouts, different information regarding gender equity needs to be around campus to raise that awareness. So if there may be a bias that you have in regards to a specific group or gender or cultural background, you can become educated on those biases and treat everyone with that respect and that kindness that we all seek.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ms. Joseph. I think the words that stood out to me the most were inclusion and accessibility, and they go hand in hand together. Can we focus on, Dr. Nicholas, what are some programs that you do and have at McKinney State University currently running, or that you've seen in the past that do really well, that promote that inclusion in our space and Title IX power-based violence, as well as accessibility? If you can speak to those two.
Yeah, so in terms of the programs that we do, we often insert this subject matter into standing programs, and that's typically the best approach, because this type of content isn't anything that's going to drive a large amount of students to, or even employees to attend a function. So routine programs that we have on an annual basis, like obviously orientations, we do meetings for specific groups of students, athletes, fraternities, sorority life, students who live on campus. So we embed this content into those programs to be sure that everybody is introduced to this subject matter as something being important in the McNeese State University community. It's something that we don't tolerate in terms of students having a poor experience as a result of no gender inclusivity or having access or being exposed to issues involving sexual misconduct. I think the best way to know what works for your campus is to know the pulse of your campus. Every program that's done at another institution may not be the best program for your institution. Now, I do say you need to network with colleagues and find out what they're doing, but understand your campus and do what's best for your campus community. I also think it's important to facilitate programs that are not like this. This is great, and this is a room of what I believe are mature adults who can stay focused and pay attention to a panel, but let's be real, when we're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds, if we were doing this program for college students, it might not be as impactful as it is today. So I'm a big fan of things that are interactive and engaging and that captures people's attention. I won't say this just because she's sitting up here, but Monica came to our campus about a month ago and did a training. Now this was for professionals on campus as well as law enforcement. But the way she presents the material, the media that she inserts, the interactivity that she makes a part of her presentations make them enjoyable. So it's important that the things that you do on your campus, specifically for your students, it needs to be something that gets them out of their seats, moving around, using critical thinking skills, and talking about actual things that they're living and doing on a day-to-day basis. I think they're going to internalize the information better.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas, for that. Knowing your audience is so important, especially in the work that we do, so thank you for raising that point. And to that point, our audience is not only our university communities and wherever we are, practicing at, but it's also the state of Louisiana. And so I want to kind of move over to being accountable, being transparent in the work that we do. Senator Rivera, how can our data across our institutions show that transparency and accountability as it relates to Title IX and power-based violence? How do we reflect that in the data that we show?
So, one thing that I'm very excited about is some legislation that we created, because what we learned was oftentimes just because we pass legislation does not mean it's always enacted and always followed through. So then we created a review panel, which is the power-based violence review panel that meets quarterly. And each system has to give a report that is transparent, that is on their website. You can go and look right now on any of the system's website, and you can see most of this information. So that information is also available to the general public. But you brought up a very good point, Dr. Nicholas, and in terms of knowing your audience and being really interactive, because I want to ask this question by show of hands. I'd like to see how many of you guys are part of the FLU system. If you just raise your hands, if you're part of the system, I just want to see. No, the university. No, the university. The university. The university, but let me just say the university. Okay, how many of you are students? If you're a student, assistant, okay, I'll be from the school. How many of you are community individuals or advocates or practitioners? So then everybody else, I would assume, is a part of the system. I'm just trying to get a show of who's in the room. That's really important, because before I came today, it was really ironic that I had a call with a reporter today. And one of the questions were about transparency and data. And one of the things that they asked me about in the topic was about power-based violence and what was happening at one of the universities. And then what they believe is not happening at one of the universities. And what's so important is making sure that as we are having these discussions, that this information is getting back into our community, that it is made readily available, that people know where to go and find it. And I said to them, because it talked about one of the systems, it wasn't utilized. Let me just add that. Where they could not find the information. And so immediately after I got off the phone call, I went and I looked. It is not easily where you can see it. Those type of things are very, very important. And so as we have this review panel where we are coming back, we are getting feedback from the community, we are getting feedback from the students, we're getting feedback from the faculty, we're getting feedback for individuals who may have been a victim. We are then making changes as necessary. And as we make those changes, we want to make sure that we're getting that information.
Thank you for that, Senator Rivera. And I mean, that question couldn't have come at a better time. You had to answer it earlier. So thank you for that and explaining that, because we want the work that we do to be reflected, and we want the state of Louisiana to see that we are working and we're doing the work that's being asked of us. So that's an important point that you raised.
That's extremely important. And one of the things that the reporter said to me that was disheartening, so your comments encouraged me, was that some of the students are now beginning to feel that the work or what we have done was for naught. They are not seeing the level of progress. They are not hearing about it. And we have to be careful about that, because we don't want children or young folks to lose hope and think that this is not important work or that we're not taking it seriously. And so one of the things I shared with her is that I want her to know that this legislative body is committed to that work, and we will continue to make sure that our young people, when they come on campus, they feel safe, they know that they're safe. If something occurs, there's going to be action and there's going to be something that happens to ensure that it never happens.
And if I can add something to that I think helps with people understanding that this work continues and that it continues to be something important for our campuses. You know, we do have the data that's posted online. We're all required to have that little link on our homepage that says campus crime stats. And in most cases, it is small, you know, because to a certain extent, you know, you don't want that to be a stain on your institution, but it is there nevertheless. I think in addition to having the data posted online, whether it's the Title IX coordinator or anybody who embraces this work and the action that our institutions take against it, we need to verbalize that data as well. So I have some people in here in the room that's a part of my team, and they can tell you that at our meetings, I talk to them about case data. Now, I'm not talking to them about the individual cases because there's the confidentiality aspect of it, but for them to understand in even other meetings that we have on campus, I share what's going on campus in terms of our caseload. Something else that we do is when we have our orientations over the summer and we have a parent orientation component, is we encourage the parents to go online and look at our data. We don't hide from it. We don't tell them that we don't have an ASR or we don't have campus crime stats posted online. We let them know it's there. We tell them how to get to it, and we encourage them to go and research what our response rates are, how long we're taking to resolve cases, what kind of cases we have on campus, because we understand that things will happen. You know, I'll take something out of the page of our chief of police. He often says at parent orientations, McNeese is a small town in a big city, okay? There's no town or city where things don't happen. So yes, things will happen on our campus, but what's important for parents, potential students, current students to know, legislators, community members, is when these things happen at our institution, we're taking it serious and we're moving as expeditiously as we can to get it resolved in the best interest of everybody involved.
That's such a good point, Dr. Nicholas, and I think, you know, in terms of what Senator Barrow said, this was Lacey sitting on this panel is hopeful. The fact that we are having these conversations and we're able to talk about prevention and awareness, it's encouraging. So, Lacey, if you can bring us to what has your institution done in order to address consent?
So I think it's also good to remember our audience, like it was said earlier, not all students are involved, not every student is like me, and leaves class and goes to meetings, goes to sorority meetings and things like that. But I think our professors and our teachers do a really good job of making these things known before you can step foot into the classroom by putting this information in syllabi. That's like very, very important. And also just keeping students like at the table. Like I'm so honored to be in this room. But making sure that we're still keeping students at the table, not trying to think of how to perfectly say it.
No, tell us how y'all say it. We want to know how y'all say it. We're taking notes.
But
Just give them the vibe.
I'm gonna give y'all the vibe, like she said. Not all students are involved, and we do a lot of tabling events where students can just pass by while they're just grabbing a bite to eat, going to the snack shack or something like that, putting posters around campus and things like that, making sure we're addressing students in every way possible, not just taking one step when it comes to marketing and just making a social media post and calling it done, but having those conversations in person with faculty, with professors. If a professor sees something's wrong with a student or a student is acting a little bit different than they usually do, addressing that student, talking to that student, making sure they're good and checking in with students. I think our university does a really good job at that because we have such a great faculty to student ratio. So faculty is able to see students when they're in trouble, when they need something, when they just need someone to talk to. So I think my university does a really good job of not just following, I'm a marketing major, not just following one marketing route, but taking as many ways possible to reach a student, not just through an organization, not just through a link on the website, but actually having these conversations and being human and talking to somebody.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about prevention and awareness, you took one aspect of that consent and you told us the conversation needs to happen. And in moving that conversation forward, Ms. Joseph, if we took healthy relationships at our institutions, what would that conversation look like? Coming from the standpoint of addressing interpersonal violence.
As far as healthy relationships?
Yes.
I think it's really important because as we know, when we work with students that have experienced any form of dating violence, sexual harassment, or any type of assault, that it's really difficult for them to come forward and tell their story just because they're at high risk of their abuser finding out or someone connecting and knowing their story. So whenever there has been a report that there's a huge risk for that victim, and many times that we know whenever someone is in an abusive relationship that, leaving isn't the most important thing, safety is. And we want to remind our students that to identify maybe warning signs in relationships that make you feel unhealthy, maybe triggers that are identifiable. Also, too, as faculty and staff, having a trauma-informed report with the students and an approach to let them know that we're here for you, we support you, we see you in your moment of crisis. We're not here to judge or coerce, but to just let students identify and know that if you feel something, it may be a fact. And speak to your support system, whether that's your students, your faculty, or someone that you trust, that it's important that you have to navigate through these relationships in the most healthy way. Because as Lacey said, a lot of times when students are in abusive relationships, you can see the decline in their, social activities as well as interacting with friends. Their grades may decline. So as she said earlier, staff and faculty need to be aware, and also like the gentleman said too, know your students. When you see something is a little off, go to them, find out what is happening, have that relationship with them where if something isn't connecting or you see them maybe moving in a different way that they were before, that you have an open door policy, you can help these students as well too. And also too, that having like a no secret policy. Like a lot of times, students don't want to open up and share about what they've been through as far as think they'll be judged or someone may look at them differently. But just knowing that we're here to help, we're here to support you, we're not here to judge. And also again, having that training in regards to staff, how to talk to students when they're going through a difficult time, how to have those difficult conversations with students, and also staff, but students as well too, how to support your friend if you may see warning signs in an abusive relationship, and how to maintain that healthy relationship and exude those boundaries to keep yourself safe while you're navigating that relationship.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. I see Monica gearing up for us. Can you speak to bystander intervention as well? That's so important. We broke it down consent from a student perspective. Ms. Joseph has provided us a victim-centered approach in terms of addressing healthy relationships and how we can educate our campuses. But bystander intervention is so important in how we're moving, so important in terms of how we're delivering information. Can you speak on that?
Teressa's gonna kill me because before I answer your question, I wanna say, there's one thing I wanna say about the data, what we were talking about. So all of you are now putting your data online, and that is scary to do that. Because you may compare your data from last year and see that some of your numbers are going up. I promise you, if you see an increase in any of your power-based numbers, do not think that you have more crime on campus than you did previously. I say this to law enforcement, from state police down to the smallest, tiniest police department. When law enforcement starts believing victims and prosecuting crimes, such as domestic violence and sexual assault especially, you will see a rise in the number that is being reported, because they are underreported crimes. So if you start seeing those numbers rise, please know It's not that you have a new problem on campus, it's that the problem is being exposed, and those numbers are gonna level out. And I know that's scary, especially those of you who are deans and in administration and presidents. That's the last thing you want, is to see those numbers go up. That's scary, but it's not necessarily a bad thing whenever your reporting numbers start to go up, because if someone is sexually assaulted and their friend is too, they're gonna say, you can go to the police department because they're gonna believe you. You can go to the Title IX office because they're gonna investigate. And that gives people the safety to be able to report, and that's what we want. So don't be scared of the data, and don't be scared of those numbers going up, because I think too often we are. So I will answer your question now, if that's okay.
That's a great point, Em.
I had to say that. So I will say this on bystander intervention. One of the things, when I have the pleasure of serving on the power-based violence review panel, and very early on in one of our first Zoom meetings, because we were on Zoom back when all this started, Dr. Henderson said something that really has stuck with me this whole time, and that is, it's not enough to enact these policies on our campuses. We must change the culture on our campuses. And I really, really feel that Dr. Henderson has done that, and Erica knows, and a lot of you in this room, I have been singing his praises for years. And it's because I really feel that he understands that you do have to change the culture on the campuses, and that is the bystander intervention portion. And look, this is something that has evolved over time, right? We used to, you used to be able to make a certain type of joke. And look, I have the most inappropriate sense of humor. It's how I deal with my trauma. It's really bad. But at the end of it, there is definitely some lines. I talk about the fact that, you can punch up, you can't punch down. And what does that mean? Well, it's okay for a comedian to tell a joke about Bill Cosby and not accepting a drink from Bill Cosby, but it's not okay to tell a joke about one of Bill Cosby's victims. If you don't know what the difference is between those two things, then don't make a joke at all. It really is, it's that simple. And so it is our responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility to, when you see the girl in the bar who's had too much to drink, or you see the boy that is being picked on or bullied in some way or harassed in some way, that you let them know this is not okay. If you look nationally at campus surveys done for years and years and years on drinking, everyone self-reports that they drink way more than they do. Kids report that they are having way more sex than they actually are. This has been common for years and years. And it's time that we shed light on this, and that we change the culture on our campuses, and those things are not accepted. Those things are not acceptable, and that the student leaders and all students and faculty, that joke is not acceptable in my classroom, and this is why. Explain to them why this is not acceptable. And all of that has to be done consistently, and the culture itself has to be changed. And that will change the conversation, and that will encourage the bystander intervention, because that is a very, very important part. And for so long, we've said things like, okay, girls, go out in groups, don't leave your friends behind, watch your drinks. But why is no one saying, hey guys, don't try and target the drunkest girl in the group? Why is nobody saying that? And that's how we change the culture. That's the way that bystander intervention should be done.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Taylor. Sure. But that's such a great point in terms of having a different type of conversation. Out with this is the standard, this is how we used to address behavior of this nature, but now we are having a conversation that extends beyond who we were targeting in terms of what that conversation looked like. So, it's such a great point that you brought up, in using the data and having the data lead us to those conversations. Dr. Nicholas and Monica, you can as well talk to us about how the data that we are now providing to our audience, the state of Louisiana, how does that change the work that we do?
I don't know if it necessarily changed the work. I think it just makes us more accountable. And preparing for that question, one of the notes that I put up, I feel the strongest accountability piece in the data we have to report is we have to report how long it took for a case to be resolved. I'm big on quick, efficient resolutions, not rushing through the process, still being thorough, but at the same time, whether it's the respondent or the complainant, and I hope we have a chance to talk about due process because I have some good notes about that. But whether it's the respondent or the complainant, we don't want these individuals wondering what their future will look like for months. We need to try to move through our process as quickly as possible. So I think the data, and particularly that piece of how long it took for us to resolve the case, I think it just motivates us to get things done quicker and efficiently, because we don't want something posted online that says pending. We don't want something posted online where you have one case that was resolved in 15 days, but then another case it took 75 days because an inquiring mind wants to know why did it take that long for a case to be resolved. So that's what I would say. I don't necessarily think it changed the work. I just think it requires us to be more efficient because things will be out in the public for people to judge us.
Absolutely. And that efficiency, moving right into what you want to discuss in terms of adjudication and due process. Are there best practices for conducting fair and impartial investigations and hearing that would get us to that efficiency that you mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. And the reason why I wanted to talk about due process, because the biggest pain point in being a Title IX coordinator is when a case is all said and done, you're going to be the bad guy to somebody, whether it's the complainant or the respondent. And what I try to do is, on the front side of any case, is to educate complainants and respondents to understand that Title IX proceedings are balanced proceedings. I have the same obligation to a respondent that I have to a complainant in terms of supportive measures, interim measures, and making sure as best as possible that their progress at the institution, whether it's an employee or a student, is not interrupted until this case is resolved. Lost my train of thought. I had another point.
And you balance that with the rights of both the complainant and the respondent.
Yes, so the other point I wanted to make was the personnel that you have a part of the process. And like your confidential advisors, your advocates / advisors throughout the case process. It's important that you have a good, diverse pool of individuals to work with, whether it's students or employees, because in certain circumstances, they want to work with a particular type of person. They want the person to have a certain profile. So if you have a small population of confidential advisors or hearing advisors, and that student or employee, whoever it is, whether it's the complainant or the respondent, if they don't have a person that they can relate to throughout the process, they're going to feel like they're already behind. Because, just using this for an example, if you have a black male student that particularly wants a black male advocate, but you don't have that available, and now, hypothetically, this black male student has to receive advocacy from a white female, that black male student may not be comfortable and not feel like they're fully supported throughout the process. The other point I wanted to make about due process that again makes it difficult is a Title IX case is not the university versus anybody. It's the complainant versus the respondent. And the university's obligation is to make sure that the process is fair, impartial, just, and follows whatever protocol we have written to follow. But we're not inserted as a party on either side. And again, that makes it difficult because when the case is resolved, whether it's responsibility or lack thereof, somebody is upset with the university and feel like they were mistreated when it wasn't our process to start with.
Yes. Such a great point. Thank you. I'm glad we had that time for that. I'm glad you reminded me about that because it's so important. And often as a practitioner doing the work, forgetting to have those foundational conversations. This is what Title IX does. This is how Title IX has not changed since 1972, but the guidance has, and this is what the new guidance is, and it can change. So thank you for that, Dr. Nicholas. And I think it's so important in what you mentioned with the advocacy piece and making sure that we have someone at the table to speak for individuals in our world, they're complainants. And Ms. Joseph's world, they can be survivors. And so speaking on that, how do we bring our efforts forward in terms of addressing marginalized backgrounds, in terms of addressing survivors that are part of communities that we often don't talk about? And so while Ms. Joseph is pulling up her notes, was specifically addressing students of color and students that are in the LGBTQ plus community.
Absolutely. Well, as we know that students are part of the LGBTQ plus community, as well as students of color, they usually experience higher rates of intimate partner violence. And they usually have limited access to resources and usually face several other barriers when it comes to reporting any form of abuse or harassment. And in our ongoing quest for equality and justice, embracing the concept of intersectionality becomes instrumental in understanding and also addressing the challenges faced by both these communities, the LGBTQ plus community as well as people of color. And when we embrace intersectionality, it empowers as well as amplifies the voices and experience of these marginalized groups that they face within our institution and even within our world. And it ensures that the concerns, perspectives, and unique challenges faced by these students are most of all acknowledged, addressed, and as well as respected as well too. And we have to remember that intersectionality challenges the one-size-fits-all approach to policy as well as advocacy work. And instead, it usually emphasizes the significance of crafting inclusive policies that consider the unique needs and lived experience of individuals in these marginalized backgrounds as well too. And also too, LGBTQ plus students and students of color should all have the same rights and deserve the same protections as all students do as well too. And under Title IX, that consists of a prompt, equitable, and complaint process. So just because a student's cultural background, their sexual identity, or what they identify as, there shouldn't be a differential treatment or how they're viewed as seen. They should be respected and empowered and given those same services whenever there is a complaint of harassment or any form of abuse. They can feel included and not looked over or judged because they come from a marginalized background as well too. And the ways that we can ensure that this takes place and that our marginalized students are seen as equal and they're respected due to their cultural background or their sexual identity is by raising awareness on our institutions and our campuses, challenge the systemic oppression that these groups may feel or experience, also amplify their voices, let them know that they're seen and heard and valued as well too. And we can also create inclusive and equitable spaces for these students. And lastly, we can inspire these students to take collective action as well too. And we have to remember and know that no victim or survivor of abuse is the same. You know, abuse is abuse and violence is violence. And most of all, we have to remember and know that this can happen to anyone. And each individual who reports abuse or harassment on their college campus should be respected and valued with the same compassion and empathy as any other students, regardless of their cultural background or their sexual identity as well too. And when we do this, we can take the positive steps that are needed to have a more inclusive and equitable institution for our students and faculty and staff as well too.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I'm sorry, I wanted to say something. Well, you know what, this panel was so informative in terms of the work that you continue to do, Senator Barrow, in prioritizing Title IX, prioritizing power-based violence, the work that you do, Lacey, as a student leader at Southeastern Louisiana State University, having those conversations with students, letting them know that they are heard. Monica, the work that you continue to do across the state, training us, using your jokes to make sure that all of the data that we have, we're using it for good, and we know that the data comes from a place that we can respond appropriately. Ms. Joseph, the awareness, the commitment to survivors, thank you for the work that you do. And of course, my dear Dr. Nicholas, thank you for always leaning in on the foundation of the work that we do. I'd like to use this opportunity if anyone has any closing statements they'd like to add.
I was waiting for that point. Because I think here, I was sitting here contemplating whether or not I was going to say this, but I think that I need to say this because people need to know when they are doing a good job, and so I'm going to step out and do this. Maybe not make some of the other folks happy, but the truth is the truth. So first of all, you've done a great job moderating this board. And I want to thank my legislative assistant, or really she's my capital assistant. So if you call it state capital, you will see her. She was in many of those hearings, taking notes, Dr. Adrian Conrad, for being with me. So when this whole process started, certainly I shared with you guys how we got started with LSU, and they had a lot of things going on, especially with leadership. And so the one thing that I have seen consistently, especially with this system, not because you're here, Dr. Henderson, but it's the truth, is the intentionality, the focus on the issue, and the level of consistency, Dr. Kelly, that you guys have brought to the system. I have watched, and so of all the systems, I've watched each one, and the level of consistency, because continuity is important to anything in terms of the flow, where to go, who to talk to, who's involved. That is extremely important, and you guys have had the most consistency, and I've seen the most progress with your system, and that's from my perspective. To me, it's the truth. And I just want to say thank you. I want to acknowledge Dr. Kim Reed, who took this bull by the horn. We had no idea exactly where we were going when we started Monica. You rightly did exceed my expectations. But the one thing that I am confident in with this new governor is if you're going along with him, I think we'll be safe. At least on this issue.
Feel free to call him and tell him that.
Because you understand, and one of the big issues when we first started off was, and I call it a big issue, was the whole police piece. It was a big hurdle for us to cross because all across the state there was no uniformity in terms of how it was done, who was responsible, who you talked to, and that was one of the big pieces that you brought to the table. And so I just want to applaud all of you. I'm glad to be a part of this distinguished panel. And I would say to you to continue to keep up this work, but as you stated before, because for me, and one of the things that I said to the reporter today, because I shall never forget the survivors that we met and the stories that I heard. And for some of them who did not go back to school, the impact that left on their life. And to this day, we still don't know how they are moving through and matriculating through life. We don't know what that looks like for them. Because many of them, we've never seen again. And so, I take it very seriously. And when someone comes and say they have experienced something, I want to make sure that we have all of the right safeguards in place to ensure that those needs are being taken care of. And the best way we can do that is making sure that the students are always protected.
I just want to take this time to say thank you. This is a beautiful experience. This is very awesome. This is something that I'm definitely going to remember from my presidency. But I just want to kind of leave with this note to validate every concern that a student has. to take every report very seriously, because if one falls out the boat, we all drown. Because then a student won't feel validated. It's just going to be a domino effect. So to make sure that we validate every student's concern and make sure our students feel seen, heard, and accounted for.
So I do want to echo some of the things that Senator Barrow said. Obviously, Senator Barrow's leadership on this issue has been incredibly unprecedented, and the state is very, very lucky to have her. We got you for 4 more years, right? before your term limited. I don't know, I had this thought the other day. I was like, wait, she wanted to, okay, wait, we're good. But I do also want to say, I have been to every single one of your campuses. There is no other system that I can say that for. I've been to every single one of your campuses. Every single campus. I know every police chief in this system. They have called me. I have their cell phone numbers. They have my cell phone number. I know multiple police officers in every department in the system. They have attended they have not only brought me onto campus. Is Bill in here? I can't see. Bill, are you in here? Oh, he's in the back. There he is. Bill had me go live in Ruston for 3 days so I could train all of his police officers. There's only so many places to eat in Ruston. I love you so much, I do. And I will come back to Ruston for you, Dr. Henderson. But there's only so many places you can eat in 3 days in Ruston. And across the system, across the UL system, the different trainings that we do for law enforcement, we have had multiple detectives and police officers from the system, including one of your baby detectives, as I started calling her. She wasn't even a detective yet, from here in Southeastern. Alyssa, I give her a little shout out. She is passionate about this issue. She came to a 3-day training we had in Marksville. The university paid for her to come. And it was 3 days before she became a detective. So now she's officially a baby detective. We're very proud of her. And I think she's going to do great things for the student body here. She has a real passion. So system-wide, I think that you guys have done an amazing job. That goes, I think that speaks to the leadership of the system, of Dr. Calais and Dr. Henderson, the presidents of each of the universities, the chiefs of police for each of the universities, the Title IX coordinators, and of course my dear friend Teressa, who I just talk about all the time, and talk about how, if you don't know, like you say, dog years is like 7 times human years. Well, Title IX years, she's been doing this for 122 years. Because I think she's the longest serving Title IX coordinator in the state of Louisiana. So God bless her. And she is fantastic. But I think the work that this system is doing is great. I think your law enforcement is right on track. I think your Title IX coordinators are on track. And all I can really say is, hopefully, as we move forward into a new administration, we're able to work with the legislature, keep this going in the same direction. But regardless of any of that, what the elected officials do, I am not concerned about the UL system because of all of you. I know you all, regardless of what Senator Barrow and I do, you all are going to continue to do this work and take care of the students, and for that I'm very appreciative.
Okay, I'll be brief. So in closing, I'd like to say, as far as the...
Is that a dig at me?
No,
I'm not brief. I am never brief.
3:15 was the session, so I don't want people to be late for the session. But in terms of us who do the work on a day-to-day basis, let's continue to make sure that we're leaning on our colleagues and making sure that we're reaching out when we have those special situations and we know we need to have those conversations. I know I'm preaching to the choir because we already kind of do that. but then also making sure we're using our community partnerships that we have, because oftentimes there are things that exceed the limits that we have in terms of our day-to-day expertise. So making sure that we have good relationships with our community partners. And then the final word for the room is, there are certain things in higher education that we often quote as everybody's job. We know retention is one of those things. As a student affairs practitioner, to me, engagement is one of those things that's everybody's job. Well, let's add Title IX and power-based violence compliance to the list. And let's make that one of those things that we all embrace, we all need to be educated on. We all need to be sure that our campuses are in full compliance of these regulations, and let's not be a stain on our university, our system, or the state of Louisiana.
You sparked a fire in me when you did mention about our community partners, and this has been an amazing panel, and thank you so much for having the coalition be a part of it. But just to continue to raise that awareness in regards to intimate partner violence, because we're seeing through data through the coalition that these numbers are definitely increasing, and they're increasing with our younger students and our young adults. So raising awareness in regards to intimate partner violence, know that when students are on campus, they can go to their Title IX coordinator for that proper report, as well as support that they can feel empowered after their experience with domestic violence or abuse is prominent and very important. So kudos to everyone on the panel that does provide that service, and also to connect to your local domestic violence agencies if you have any information or you need any resources or anything that can help our students when they're going through this difficult time after their experience of abuse and violence as well too. So thank you again for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
So in closing, I'd like to thank you all again for your dedication to this critical endeavor. And I look forward to our continued collaboration and partnership in shaping a brighter and more equitable future for education. And I just want to extend that thank you to the audience. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for always allowing us to, like Dr. Nicholas said, use you for support in your respective areas of